Hey everyone, Digital Scriptorium here, and today I want to show off how to install Linux Mint 22.2 codename Zara from start to finish. This video will be showing installing the XFCE desktop environment. However, I will have other guides on my channel showing off other desktop environments being installed as well, should you want something different. This guide is intended as a general use case installation of the operating system. I'm going to show off system requirements, how to create the bootable media, how to install the operating system, and then a general tour of the operating system itself at the very end. I won't be going into specific application usage as that is outside of the scope of my guide today. All of the links I show off I will include in the description below so you can easily find them if need be. One disclaimer I just want to mention is a warning that this is an operating system install guide where I completely remove the previous operating system. As is with any operating system, you might run into unforeseen issues. So you have to go into this with an open mind that issues might spring up. Worst case, you can always attempt to install a different operating system back on. If you need help, I have many different Windows and Linux guides to accomplish this on my channel. Before I begin, I also want to mention that if you're feeling generous to think about donating to support my channel in either Ko-Fi or Patreon, every bit goes right back into making new guides. Alright, with that all said, let's dive into it. Alright, so first off, let's talk about the system requirements to run Linux Mint. Now thankfully it requires pretty minimal hardware this day and age. So for instance, you only need 2 GB of RAM, however 4 GB is recommended for comfortable usage. If you've got more than 4 GB of RAM, that will certainly help. You'll need 20 GB of disk storage, however 100 GB is recommended. And then you just need a 1024 by 768 resolution for your monitor. It doesn't mention anything about the processor, however I would recommend a processor that has 2 cores at least. 4 cores always helps to really make things extra peppy, but really dual cores is kind of my bare minimum, at least in my opinion. Now let's go over downloading Linux Mint 22.2. On linuxmint.com's main page, you'll find the download button for it right here, so let's click on that. And you're going to be given the option to download several desktop variations of it. When I say desktop, I mean desktop environments. So this is basically what GUI or graphic user interface you want to use. Now, in a previous guide on 22.2, I showed off installing the Cinnamon Edition, and since this guide is showing off the XFCE Edition, then that is the one we're going to download today. So what you would do is click the download button, and then if we scroll down a little bit, there's the option to do an integrity and authenticity check. I'm not going to run that because I feel as though the source I'm going to download from is pretty legit. However, it's completely optional. If you feel you want to check it, then feel free to. Anyhow, you scroll down a little bit, and then you're going to have your choice of download mirrors. In this case, locate the mirror that is closest to you so that it's generally going to be downloading faster. So in my case, I'll just click on Clarkson University for mine since I'm in the US, and then we'll just wait for it to finish downloading and then we will continue on. Now with the ISO downloaded for Linux Mint, the next thing we need to do is work the magic of getting the ISO onto a USB thumb drive and make it into bootable media so that we can actually install it on the machine. You do have several options. On the Windows front, you could use either Etcher or we can use Rufus. Or if you're on Linux, you can pop open Terminal and you can use the DD functionality to run a command, which will make a bootable USB thumb drive with the ISO. Anyhow, for today's video, we are going to show off utilizing Rufus to create the boot media. Now the nice thing about Rufus is that it does not require installing anything, there are no dependencies, and it itself doesn't have to be installed. It's just a self-contained executable that we will run and work the magic. So if you scroll down about 1/3 of the page, then you're going to find the download section. And unfortunately, their website does have a lot of clickbait things on it, unfortunately, for advertisements. So just like I said, look for the download section and it will mention latest releases. There's going to be a number of options you can choose. Most users are going to choose the top one, which is the standard Windows x64 version. There's a portable version, which I don't utilize. There is an x86 or 32-bit version. In case you're still on a 32-bit machine, then you can download that one. And then if you are on Windows on ARM, you can download the ARM-based version. However, for today, and like I said, for most users, we will download the standard Windows x64 variant. So we'll click on that. And then at this point, we can close out of our web browser, and then we can continue on. So before we do continue on with the magic, there's actually two things that we want to do to make sure that the bootable thumb drive does not get corrupted. And when I say corrupted, I mean that the files themselves get corrupted as Rufus is working the magic of creating the bootable media. Windows has a bad habit of, one, the autoplay functionality kicking off midway through Rufus working the magic, and that can cause corruption. The other is that Windows Defender's real-time protection can sometimes sniff out Linux files as being false positives. So the problem with that is that it will gobble up or Pac-Man the data as it's trying to be written to the thumb drive. And Rufus may say that it completed successfully, and then you go through the process of actually trying to install it, and then you run into weird errors or it freezes or just other oddities. So let's go through those steps right now. So first, just as I'd mentioned, let's take a look at the autoplay feature first. So go down to the bottom left-hand corner, click on the Start menu, and then type in Auto, and it should hopefully show up with autoplay settings. If it doesn't, just fully type out autoplay space settings, and it will appear for you. So let's click on autoplay settings, and then it's just as easy as just toggling that off, and that'll take care of that portion. So next up is the Windows Defender portion that we need to now temporarily turn off. So if this is a machine that you plan to still continue to run Windows on, then like I said, this is just temporarily suspending real-time protection. It's basically buying us 15 minutes or until the next reboot, and then the real-time protection will turn back on. So let's go back to the Start menu and then do a search for security, and then we should see a best match of Windows security. If it doesn't show you a best match, then just type in Windows space security, and then it should get us there. Anyhow, we'll click on Windows security, and then click on Virus and Threat Protection, and then Virus and Threat Protection Settings, click on Manage Settings, and then this is the section that we want to adjust. So it's the real-time protection, and all we have to do is toggle the on to off, select yes for the UAC prompt, and then we're also going to get a balloon pop up any second, just like that. We can just click the X for it, and then we can close out of that. So at this point, go ahead and plug in a 4 GB or larger USB thumb drive. If you don't have any thumb drive on hand and you're looking for a recommendation, I will have a link in the description below for an inexpensive name brand one that you can utilize, which should get the job done. So in my case, I'm going to plug my USB thumb drive in, and then we will continue on. Next up, let's go to the Downloads folder. So I'm going to open Windows Explorer, and we will go to the Downloads folder, or I should mention anywhere that you downloaded Rufus and Linux Mint. You can hunt them down. Anyhow, let's double click on Rufus, select yes for the UAC prompt, and then hopefully we should see a USB thumb drive is being detected in the top section. If your USB thumb drive is not being detected up here, then a few steps you can do is either pull the thumb drive, give it a few seconds, and plug it back in. And if that doesn't work, leave the thumb drive plugged in and reboot your machine. And then just make sure to go through the steps of turning your real-time protection off again, as it will have turned back on, and then fire Rufus back up. If for some reason it still does not pop up, then take a look in this PC if you've got it on your desktop, or you can hunt it down within Windows Explorer on here, and then try to see if it's actually showing up in this portion. If it is showing up here and not in Rufus, then you could always right-click on it, select Format, and I will mention the warning that formatting it is going to destroy all the data on the thumb drive, which we're going to do anyhow with Rufus. So if there's any data that you need to back up, please do so before you continue on with the step. And you would literally just select Start, and you literally can just name it if it doesn't have a name. Select Quick Format, that'll do the job, and then click on Start. 3 to 5 seconds, and then it should pop up and say it's complete. Anyhow, hopefully that will make the USB thumb drive appear for you. So right off the bat, Rufus gave us this prompt saying that there's a DBX update available. I like to go with everything that Rufus recommends, so let's select yes for this. And then next up, let's click on the select button and then locate the Linux 22.2 ISO, click on open, and this will make it so that everything in this section that was previously grayed out is now an option to change. However, I leave it up to Rufus to determine the best option for us. So at this point, we're going to just leave everything as is. You could name it a different volume label if you wanted to, but really this should give us the information we need. Now, just as I mentioned before, when I mentioned that you can format the thumb drive to make it potentially show up in Rufus, at this point, once we click on start, we're going to go through a few screens, but it is going to format and then load all the data onto the thumb drive. So if there's anything you need to back up, please do so now, otherwise it will get nuked in regards to the thumb drive. So we'll click on start, and then it's going to mention that an ISO hybrid image is detected. We're going to leave the recommended option and click on OK. And then here's the mentioning that it's going to destroy the data on the thumb drive. That's fine for me. Click on OK, and then just be patient as it works the magic. All right, if all goes well, we should see a green ready state. If Rufus does pop up with any errors, there's a few things we can do. One is just try it again. Second thing to do is reboot your machine, make sure that real-time protection again is temporarily turned off, and try again. If it still seems to be erroring out, I would try a different USB thumb drive, or maybe download the Linux Mint ISO one more time just to make sure that that wasn't corrupted. Anyhow, at this point we can click on close, and next up is going to be getting our machine to actually boot off of the USB thumb drive. This, in my opinion, sometimes is the most difficult part of the entire process, just because every make and model machine is different, and so I recommend that you Google your specific make and model machine and figure out what the key is on your keyboard to press for getting the machine to boot off of a USB thumb drive. Some models it's the F2 key, F4, F6, F8, F10, F12, the delete key. There's many different options out there. Anyhow, at this point I will unplug the USB thumb drive from this machine as I'm going to plug it into a different machine, and we're going to go through that process right now. And just to be safe, let's gracefully disconnect it from the machine. So in the bottom right hand corner, there's the little USB icon. Left click on that, eject storage device, and we'll give it a moment. And if it doesn't pop up saying anything that is okay to pull the thumb drive, then I would just say go ahead and pull it. So I'm firing up the other machine right now, and I'm mashing the F12 key because that's what the boot key is for my machine. Now, the options screen that pops up is going to be different depending on, again, your make and model. However, usually it's pretty similar, and basically what we're looking for is something along the lines of this. So in this case, it says USB HDD or USB hard disk drive. It might mention USB thumb drive. It could even mention that it's a USB virtual CD drive. But you can also look at the model specific information. So in this case, I know this is it. So I'm going to down arrow to it like I've done here. I'm going to hit enter, and it should hopefully boot off of it. I'm going to use the up down arrow keys just to stop Grub from moving forward, just so I can explain this screen a little bit. So by default, there's the Start Linux Mint 22.2 XFCE 64-bit. There's also the compatibility mode option, just as you see here. The compatibility mode option I only recommend people with NVIDIA graphics cards to use, as this is more or less kind of designed for them. If you do ever run into any issues with the top one also, you could just try compatibility mode just to try to make it happy. The other thing is that there's the OEM install for manufacturers, and just as it mentions, it's really for manufacturers to use. There's the boot from next volume. There's the UEFI firmware settings, and this will actually get you into the BIOS of your machine to where you can change up things if need be. And there's also a memory test feature. So if things during the installation process are getting a little wonky, it might be worth testing your memory. Anyhow, I'm going to arrow to the very top, and we're going to go with the default option. So we'll hit enter for this, and then just be patient as it starts loading everything off of the thumb drive. This is of course going to be completely dependent on how fast your thumb drive is, how fast the USB port is on your machine, all that good stuff. And we should hopefully see the Linux Mint logo as it slowly loads things up. Alright, at this point we are now loaded into what's called the live environment. So live environment is actually a preview of Linux Mint. So you could take a peek at various settings and applications and stuff that come pre-bundled on Linux Mint without ever actually loading it on your machine. The downside is that any configuration changes you make or any apps that you download will not persist through reboots. You also kind of take a performance hit as well, as it's not fully utilizing the full raw performance of your machine. So one thing that we do want to do before moving forward is make sure that our machine is connected to the internet in some capacity. So whether it's wireless or hardwired, I do recommend hardwired if it's possible. However, a lot of machines now don't have Ethernet ports on them, or you may just be too far away from your router and modem to be able to connect in, and that's fine. But like I said, if it is an option, connect in via Ethernet. However, if we take a look in the bottom right hand corner, there's going to be the little Ethernet icon. Left click on this, and if you're plugged into an Ethernet connection, hopefully you'll see wired connection 1. If you're just going to do the wireless option, then hopefully under Wi-Fi networks you should see available networks. You can click on that, and that's going to show you all the available wireless networks within range. I'll have this partially blurred out just for the privacy of my neighbors, but you could choose a wireless network and connect up to that. So just wanted to throw that out there. So at this point, with our machine connected to the internet, and the reasoning for that is to pull down any optional updates and stuff like that to help the install process along. So we will go to install Linux Mint on the desktop. Just double click on that, wait for it to load up. The first page we're going to be met with is the welcome page, which is also the language selection page. So select the language that is best for you, and then let's click on continue. Next up is going to be the keyboard layout. So there's the main language option on the left hand side, and then there's a further means of configuring your keyboard based on more of a locale. In my case, I'm going to leave mine as is, but I do also want to mention that there is a spot that you can type in things from your keyboard to just double check that it looks good in comparison to what your keyboard is. So you can type in hello, that looks great, perfect. Anyhow, and like I said, in my case, this looks fine for me, so I'll click continue. And then installing the multimedia codecs is optional, however, I do recommend it. And this is going to give us the functionality of basically loading the codecs that are needed for video formats to work, especially for certain websites like YouTube and things like that. So I do recommend you check it, and then let's click on continue. Now, because this guide is going over completely nuking the previous operating system and putting Linux Mint 22.2 XFCE on as the only operating system, and that we're not dual booting, we are going to select this option, erase disk and install Linux Mint. I do plan to have a dual boot video available in the coming weeks. So with this checked, there is the option for advanced features. And so if you toggle on use LVM with new Linux Mint installations, it does give you the option to encrypt your Linux Mint installation for security. This is something that is completely optional, and I do recommend that you look into it a little bit in case you are trying to figure out if this is something you want to do. I'm going to leave mine on none and click OK, and then we're going to click on install now. One thing just to mention is that at this point it's going to format the entire hard drive of your machine. If there is any data that you need to back up, please back it up before you click that continue button that's on this page here. In my case, I have everything I already need, so I'm going to click on continue, and then as it's actually installing behind the scenes, it's now going to give us a few prompts. One is that it actually gives us a time zone configuration section. One thing you can do is you can either blank this out and type in a city that's nearest to you, or you can also click on the map to set your time zone. In my case, I'm just going to leave mine as New York, and I will click on continue. And then there's the who are you section. So let's go ahead and type in your name, and then it will set a generic computer name. So this is the host name of your machine that will show up on the network. You can either leave it as is, or you can feel free to change it. I'm going to change mine just because I can. And I'll just call it LM Desktop for Linux Mint Desktop. It's also going to pre-populate in the first name that you have. You can always change this up if you wanted to. I'm going to leave mine as is. And then there's going to be choose your password. So I'm going to set a password. I do recommend you set something that's not a weak password. In my case, I'm setting a weak password just for the sake of this video, but I do recommend you get this to show that it is a strong password. You can also click the eyeball, which will reveal what the password is that you typed. The other thing is you'll have the option to log in automatically, which kind of defeats part of the purpose of having a password. However, I do recommend you leave the require my password to log in enabled. There is also the option to encrypt my home folder if you wanted to. I'm just going to leave that as is, and we'll click on continue. And then at this point, we're just waiting for Linux Mint to finish installing. You can either watch the slideshow that's going to move forward, and you can also manually move it forward if you wanted to. Or if you wanted to see what it's actually doing in the installation process, there's the little caret right next to copying files. Click on that and that'll show you the terminal magic that is happening behind the scenes. Anyhow, at this point, we'll just be patient and wait for this to continue to crunch along. And if all goes well, we should see the installation complete message. If for some reason it seems to fail, I would just try it again. And we'd kind of go back to, if it keeps failing, try a different thumb drive, or try just downloading the ISO again to rule out any issues. Anyhow, you do have the option to continue testing in the live environment if you wanted to. However, I'm going to click on restart now, and then just be patient as it continues on the process. And then we should get this pop-up that says, please remove the installation medium, then press enter. So I will pull the thumb drive right now. And now that the thumb drive is pulled, I'll click the enter key, and then let's just be patient as it loads up. So we should be met with the login screen. So let's type in our password and hit enter. The first thing that we'll be met with is the welcome screen. So you can take a peek at this. You can follow along with the let's go option, which will kind of show you a few different things that you can learn about Linux Mint, XFCE, and all that good stuff. However, at this point, Linux Mint 22.2 XFCE is now installed, so you could call it good at this point, or feel free to follow along, and I'm just going to do a general overview of the operating system itself. It's not going to be a super deep dive, but I'll just show off some key things and get you kind of familiar with some of the features that are part of it. So we will continue on with that right now. So first off, let's uncheck show this dialog at startup, otherwise it's going to keep popping up every time you reboot your machine or log in. And then we can click the X to close out of that. Before we continue on, we want to make sure that the machine has all the updates to rule out any bugs and security vulnerabilities. In the bottom right hand corner in the system tray is going to be the shield icon. It may or may not actually have a little colored dot on it, but we'll left click on that once. So this is the update manager. So this is where security updates, software updates, and system snapshots can be done, just as it mentions. Click on OK. And then first off, let's update manager. So let's click on apply the update. And yours may not necessarily have an update for it, but if it does, then continue on with what I'm about to show. We'll type in our password, hit enter, and then just be patient as that downloads and installs. And then it should relaunch for us. And then it's going to show us the updates that are currently pending. One thing just to mention is at the top is this blue banner that mentions, do you want to switch to a local mirror? So switching to a local mirror would speed up the process of downloading updates and all that good stuff. We'll click on yes for this just so I can show you, and then type in your password once more, hit enter. So there's going to be two mirrors. So there's the main, which is basically the Linux Mint mirror, and then there's the base, which is the Ubuntu base mirror, which is currently on Noble. So if you click in one of these, it's actually going to do an internet speed test of each one of these mirrors to figure out which one is actually the fastest. If you give it long enough, then it should have the fastest at the very top, and then it will keep going with the slower ones further down. I'm just going to choose this top US one. I'll click apply. And like I said, we can do the same exact thing for the base Noble. Left click on that, wait for it to do a quick speed test of the different mirrors, and then we'll choose the fastest one for our country at the top. I'll just go ahead and choose this one right here, and we'll click apply. And then if you take a look in the bottom right hand corner, it says click here to update the apt cache, which we will do so right now. And it's just going to go ahead and check to make sure that we're going to pull the latest updates and from those specific mirrors. There is also the option on the left hand side that you can do PPAs, additional repositories, authentication keys, and maintenance. But that's basically it for this section, so we'll click close. And then one more time, even though it already technically updated the apt cache, let's just click refresh one more time. And then let's go ahead and install these updates so that that is done. So we'll click install updates, type in your password, hit enter, and you can either watch the little loading bar here, or we can expand out the caret for details and see what it's doing in terminal land here. And just be patient as this crunches. If all goes well, we should see your system is up to date. Let's close out of the update manager, and then now let's just do a reboot just to make sure that everything is fresh. So in the bottom left hand corner, left click on the LM icon, and then more in kind of the top right is the power button. Click on that, and then click on restart, and then let's just continue on once this is done. And we'll log back in and hit enter. Alright, so with everything all patched up, let's continue on with the tour. So in the bottom right hand corner is going to be your date and time. If you left click on this, it does expand out the calendar to where you can take a look at months, days, and years. Pretty self-explanatory. So the next section over to the left is going to be the volume icon. So this is where you'll be able to move the volume slider. And if you have a microphone attached, you can also move the microphone slider for that as well. There's also going to be several different options that you can choose down below if you wanted to. And then to the next over is going to be the power options. So if we left click on the little thunderbolt, there's the presentation mode, which basically makes it so the screen will not turn off and the computer will not go to sleep. There's also the option to go directly to the power settings, and I'll go more into detail into that later. Next, to the left over from that is going to be your network section, which I briefly explained before we started installing the operating system. But once again, there is the Ethernet network connection at the top, and then there's the Wi-Fi options in the mid section, and then there's also the VPN connections that you can change up. And then next to the left of that is the update manager, which we went over previously. And then to the left of that is going to be the little bell icon, which is basically notifications that you can take a peek at. There's a do not disturb option. If there were any notifications in here, you would see them and you could click on them if you wanted. Or you could also clear the log if there are any in here. You can mark them as read, and there's also the notification settings section. Next, let's jump over to the bottom left hand corner. So there's the little LM icon for applications, and this is kind of like your start menu if you're a Windows person. Starting in the top left is going to be the reference of who is logged into the machine. And then to the right of that is going to be Settings Manager, which I'll go into more details in a little bit. There's the lock screen option. So for instance, let's say you're in a public area. You want to keep your applications open and you don't want to shut your machine down because you're just stepping away for a split second. Then you can click lock screen, and then it brings you back to the login screen, but all of your applications you have open are hanging out behind the scenes. So we'll just log back in here. So we'll log back in with our password, hit enter, and then if we had any applications open, they'd actually show up for us here. But anyhow, back to the bottom left-hand corner. So we did the lock screen button, and then to the right of that is log out. However, as I showed previously, this is actually the power options feature. So this will allow you to log out of the machine if you wanted, restart it, shut it down, suspend it, switch users, and then there's this feature at the bottom which mentions save session for future logins. So if you had a bunch of applications open and you check this, then those applications will attempt to start every time you log in. If you don't want them to auto start anymore, then just uncheck this and then you'll be fine. Anyhow, I'll click cancel for now for that. Again, bottom left hand corner, there's the favorites section, which comes preset with a few different favorite options. It's got Firefox web browser, Thunderbird mail, Pix, Rhythmbox, all sorts of stuff in here. And then below that is recently used. Now because this machine is freshly built up, we haven't really gone into anything, so currently there are no recently used options. Below that is all applications. So this is literally every single application on this machine, so there's a lot of stuff going on there. And then it starts having the subcategories. So you've got accessories, graphics, internet, and this is where you'll find all your web browsers. By default, Firefox is the only web browser here, but you could always add some other web browser if you wanted to, and then it would show up in this section. And there's multimedia, Office. Linux Mint comes pre-installed with LibreOffice, with the LibreOffice suite, which is pretty snazzy. So there's settings, and this gives you basically every setting option that's available. And then there's system with all sorts of system options that you can choose from. And then below that is going to be the search bar. So this is where you could search for apps or settings if you wanted to. So for instance, let's say I'm looking for the terminal. And I just type in terminal, and then XFCE terminal is what I could choose and launch. It's pretty snazzy. To the right of that is the show desktop button. So just as it mentions, we can minimize all open windows and show the desktop. So for instance, let's say I'll just pop open terminal. Let's say that I want to minimize all my apps. I can click that. And then if I want to bring them all back up, as it mentions, restore the minimized windows, click it again, they'll pop back up for us. Nice and easy. To the right of that is going to be Firefox, which, just as I mentioned, this is the default browser that comes pre-bundled with Linux Mint. Unfortunately, Firefox has been getting a fair amount of flack lately for their change up of policies and whatnot. So if you don't want to use Firefox, you could always install a different web browser of your choosing on the machine. But we'll quickly just go through just this stage here just so we can get to browsing. So if you have anything you want to import from a previous browser, you can, and you can click Save and Continue. I'm just going to skip this step. You can personalize Firefox by pulling down different extensions and whatnot. You can click that if you wanted to. I'm going to click on Skip this section. You can sync data across devices. I'm just going to click on Start Browsing. And then at this point, you are into Firefox, and you can feel free to jump into web browsing. So we'll close out of that. And then to the right of Firefox is going to be Terminal, which is what I clicked on just to give the show desktop demonstration. However, if you need to run any terminal commands, you can do so within this section, and we'll close out of that. And then to the right of that is going to be your Thunar file manager. So think of this as Windows Explorer if you're a Windows person. I'll maximize this. So by default, it shows us our folders that are on our username. So in this case, we're in the digital usernames folders, and these are only viewable by digital. But let's just take a peek. If we go to computer, and this gives us the full view of the file system. In my case, it's showing PyKVM as an optical drive, even though it's virtual. And then there's just the hard drive that you can click on and whatnot. And then there's the username, just as I showed off. There's desktop, so if we had anything on the desktop, then it would show up in here, but because again, this is a fresh machine, I don't have anything on the desktop. And then below that is recent, and then you've got your trash. If there's anything in the trash, then it would give you the option to empty the trash or restore the selected items if you wanted to. You've got your documents, your music, your pictures, your videos, your downloads, the file system, which is the root of your machine. And as you can actually see here, it's actually mentioning the amount used and the free space. And you can also kind of see it down the bottom here where it mentions free space. And then there is the browse network. So if you have any devices that are sharing anything on your network, such as a server of some kind, then it would appear within here. One thing I just want to show off that you may have briefly seen as I was hovering over some of these. If I hover my cursor over one of these, it actually shows in that little bottom section, the /home/digital/downloads, it's actually showing us the full location of this specific directory. So just something to mention. We'll close out of that. Next up, if you right click on the desktop background, it does give you a sub menu. So you can create a launcher, create a URL link, create folder, create a document. If you copied or cut something, you can paste it. You could open in terminal, open as root, create a link, search, open a new window, arrange desktop icons, and there's also the desktop settings section. Let's take a quick peek at desktop settings. And if we wait for this to load, then it should show us a whole bunch of backgrounds we can change up. And I'll maximize that. I'm more or less showing this off because this is a big area that a lot of people like to see how they can actually change their wallpapers. Now, just to mention, you can change the folder. If you're looking for pictures, then you could click on pictures and search for your pictures to change up your wallpaper if you wanted to. I'll change it up to this cube here. And one thing also to mention is that there is the options for menus, so you can change a bunch of configurations for menus, and you can also change up the configurations for icons. So close out of that. As you can see, I've got my new wallpaper. And one thing also that you can right click on is the system tray in the bottom. So if we right click on that, it gives you the option to do panel options. So there's a different whole bunch of panel options you can do. You can remove, you can move, you can go to properties. There's also the separator option. So besides that, let's just go to the LM icon again, and let's just take a peek at the settings manager, and I'll maximize this. So I'm not going to show off every single one of these, but I'm just going to hit kind of the key areas that a lot of people getting started just want to take a peek at. The first big one under personal is the appearance section. So this gives you the option to change up styles, which you can feel free to take a peek at these and figure out which ones you may want to change up. There's icons, so you can change up icons. You can change up fonts, and there's also settings that you can change up. Close out of that, and we'll go back to settings manager, maximize that again. There's the mouse and touchpad option. So if you want to change up your mouse buttons, you can do so. There's acceleration and sensitivity configurations that can be set. There's behavior, there's themes that you can change up the mouse cursor to. So a bunch of things in there. We'll click on all settings to bring us back, which is what I should have done previously. And then there's the power manager. So we'll click in power manager. So you have the option to change up what the different buttons will do. There's appearance configurations. If you take a look in system, there's the system sleep mode. However, one big one that you may want to take a peek at is this when inactive for. So this makes it so the machine would automatically suspend itself if it's inactive for X period of time. Now, by default, this is set to never. However, if you're on a laptop and you want to conserve battery power and you want to make sure that if you step away from it, it's not just going to run until the battery is out, you may want to set this to like 15 minutes or 30 minutes or something like that. It's completely optional to you. There's the display options. So this basically allows you to toggle when is the display going to go blank after X period of time, when to put the display to sleep, and when to switch off the display. You can change these up if you wanted to. Next up is security. You can feel free to change up these settings if you really wanted to. Anyhow, we'll click on all settings again. So the next one is software manager. We'll wait for this to finish jittering the cache, but we'll just maximize it. So software manager is pretty snazzy because this will give you kind of a one-stop shop to download most big applications out there. So it's pretty snazzy. You don't have to necessarily search the web for specific applications. You can actually check software manager first and then see if it's in here to make life easy. One thing to take a look at in the top left is the search feature. So for instance, if you wanted to download Steam, and just type in Steam, and then there's Steam that you can download. I'll hit the back arrow. There are categories that you can choose from as well. For instance, games. So here's the different games that are available, and as you can see, if I'm scrolling here, there is a lot of stuff available that you can download. Go back. Then you've got your top rated section that you can choose things from. But like I said, there is a lot of options for applications, and this just makes it so easy to get the machine up to par for whatever applications you need, web browsers, stuff like that. So close out of that. And there is the option for the Bluetooth adapters. If I actually had a Bluetooth adapter, it would give a whole bunch of options of pairing devices and all that good stuff. But anyhow, we'll just close out of that for right now. So the big thing with this is that if you're new to Linux in general, then the best advice I give people is just dive in. Learn it. Feel free to open things up, tweak your settings if you wanted to. There's just so much to dive into, and it's just a really great environment to learn things and get used to it and all that good stuff. So anyhow, that's all you need to do to install Linux Mint 22.2 XFCE Edition. If you found this video to be useful, please like it and subscribe to my channel to keep up with my latest video happenings. I also invite you to check out my channel if you haven't already, as it has many interesting guides and many more to come. Anyhow, until next time, take it easy.